Kia ora, Helen Brums here, coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1917, Wandering Wednesday. So I thought tonight might be a good time to talk, since it's Wandering Wednesday. It could be Winning Wednesday, it could be Wacky Wednesday, but tonight is Wandering Wednesday. How do you track your ancestors' movements over time? So your ancestors, everybody came from someplace. If you've been doing your DNA, you get ethnicity. You get your ethnicity results, what makes it up, and you can kind of track where you've originated from and things like that through some of your DNA records based on the locations and stuff you're from. Like, for example, what example was I going to use? I do have Irish connections, but I have no Irish DNA in me now. I know that sounds weird and wacky, but that's just how it is. But my ancestors definitely came from Scotland, and I have followed their migration patterns of some family members, not only in my family, but in Brad's family too, and with clients when they wanted to stay. I had one client one time who said that they had ancestors that came over from Ireland, and that their last name was Irish origins. And so they wanted to find out when they came over. And I says, okay, what do you know about between you and the people who probably came over from Ireland? And so they gave me all of the details that they had. And then we went and we checked on them and found out where the connection was to Ireland. So we were able to answer that question for them. So things that you can look at is follow migration patterns, research common migration routes and trails like the Oregon Trail or the Great Migration Routes. You've also got the Louisiana land, was it land grab or the Louisiana land thingy that they had? Sorry, brains fried. They might, those events like that may have aligned with your ancestors' movements. They could be in there, they may not be in there. And check land, and that's number one, check land and property records. They can reveal where ancestors bought, sold, or inherited land, helping you keep track of their location over time. Some families stayed in some areas for a while, maybe for 2 to 3 generations before they up and moved. There could have been a reason that they up and moved. I have a client whose family started in one state and were quite happily living there. Nothing going on. Everything was going perfectly fine until the government came in and says, we're taking your land. And so they had no recourse on it. I don't know the full story of the land grab where the government came back and claimed their land. We haven't found the information on that. We just note that in one of the articles written by one of the people involved at the time, said that the government came in and grabbed the land. They didn't explain why or anything else. So maybe the son didn't know why. So then they ended up moving from one state to another and settling in a county. They actually settled the county. So there's finding those, for some reasons they were forced to move. So you can find this track through land records and where they've been bought and sold or inherited land, or even had it reclaimed by the government. Explore occupational records. Some jobs like miners, railroad workers, and military personnel were frequently moving. And occupational records can provide clues in their journey. Like if they spent 30 years, for example, with the railways, were they in one location? Were they moving with that railway company? My mother-in-law's father worked for the railways for a number of years. And so we were able to track his movements with, that's how he ended up in the state that he ended up in, was because of his job with the railways. So there's different things that you can do. Miners, I've got, hang on, one moment, I have to remember this. Papa, Jane, my second great grandfather was killed in the mines in New Zealand, but he had started off as a miner in England, then went down to Australia and then moved to New Zealand with his family. And so we were able to follow that he was a miner. His brother went with him through that as well. So we're able to follow the family. So it wasn't all the family that went, it was just the 2 boys that went, the 2 sons that went, and we're able to follow them on the ship records, leaving England, arriving in Australia, then leaving Australia and going to New Zealand. And unfortunately, my second great-grandfather was killed in a mining accident, but he was a miner. He moved to where the work was. And the same with railroad workers and military. any job that required where they needed to have a even like shipyards where they were building the ships and things like that too. They would have people that would move, although most of the shipyards usually stayed in one place. It was just the ships that got moved out. But think about jobs that they may have had that might have required them to move. And maybe and if you look at the occupational records, you can provide, they may provide clues to their journeys. Some are online, most are not. And it would depend on what company that they were with and things like that as well. Look for census clues. Census records often indicate the place of birth for the individual and their children. And in some cases, it also asks where the parents were born. So if you've got mum, dad, and their kids, they'll go to mum and dad. They'll go, where were your parents born? That's one way that's how we found out this couple. And actually, no, that wasn't that one. It was a different client where I found out that their parents had been born in Ireland. But, it could say the head of the house, the husband, could turn around and say, well, my parents were born in England and Ireland. The wife, her parents could have been born in Ireland and Ireland. Mother and father both born in Ireland. And she herself was born in Ireland. Her husband was born in Ireland, and then they moved to the US. So now that gives you a clue that, they came from Ireland. So now I can go search the Irish records because you're moving backwards and see if I can find them in Ireland, find parents, find marriage certificates, that sort of thing as well. Because on some census too, they also asked, I'm trying to remember which one it was, they also asked the couple how long they had been married or what year they got married in or how long they got married. There was two different censuses that asked, one asked what year they got married, the other one asked how long they had been married. There was another census that even asked, if you immigrated into the United States, how long had you been living in the United States? If you were not born in the United States, how long have you been living in the United States? That question got asked on another census as well. So that's a good way when you're looking through the different census records, see what questions were asked. Don't just look over here where the street address is and the number of house that they were enumerated and their last name and their first names and their position in the house, whether they were head of the house, the wife, the kids, their ages, where they were born, and that's just keep going across because there's lots of interesting questions. I especially like, is it 1910? I think it's 1910 census, where they asked married women, how many children have you had and how many are still living? I thought that was a brilliant question because if some kid, you hear this story coming down through the family, oh no, mum had 10 kids, we had 10 kids, we had 10 siblings. And yet those that have been doing the family research said, we've only come up with 4 of you. Maybe, and if you get the 1910 census, they haven't been on the 1910 census, she could say, yes, I had 10 pregnancies. I only have 4 children that are still living. Even on some death certificates too, it will list that if it was a woman that, how many children that woman had and what the ages were of the children at the time that she died. That one's actually on my grandmother's death certificate. I remember that because it had my dad, my aunt, and his 2 younger brothers on there. So that helps as well. Review historical maps. And historical maps are very important because not only can it give you a context for migration paths and show settlements in towns or counties, it can also show you that towns and counties lines may have changed over time. So you could be in one county in one census, and in the next census you're in a different county because the county lines got moved between the census. And they go, oh, they moved. No, they didn't actually move. They're still living in the same house at the same address. It's the border. It's the county line that moved or the town line that moved. So keep an eye out for those as well. Historical maps. I love historical. I used to have this atlas. I got to tell the atlas story. I used to have this atlas. It was about this wide. It was about this tall. It was this big book. But it wasn't just an atlas. It had a lot of world history in there as well. And it talked a little bit about evolution in there. And it had... but it had all this, I just remember it having all of this information, and it even showed you over time how the plates moved and the countries changed shape because of the plates moving and things like that. It was just really fascinating. And then being able to go into this atlas and seeing all of these old place names. I wish I still had this atlas. I read that thing constantly when I was a kid, when I had it. I don't know when it disappeared during one move. I don't know which move that was. Yes, some things, whenever we moved, some things just seem to disappear out of my room, never to be seen again. It's just one of those moving things. But it was a really cool atlas, and it had like all this historical stuff in there as well. And like I said, you'll see the shapes of the countries. You had the old names of countries, and of course I'm like, oh, that's where that was. And then later on in years to come, I'm looking at the atlases again, and they've changed because country names have changed. And there's been border changes, and there's just been a lot. Like when I was in high school, I used to know every flag of every country in the world. And whenever we did our social studies assignments on a country, the teachers always knew my cover, because my cover every single time was decorated with that country's flag on it. That was my cover, was the country's flag. And so I knew every country. I look at different flags today and I'm like, what the hell is that one? Where did that one come from? Oh, that's the thing for this, and that's the thing. What country is that? My favorite countries that we studied was Upper Volta and Lower Volta in Africa, and now they've got some other name. And like Persia is now Iran. I'm like, I like the Persia name better. But, things change, politics change, country names get changed all the time. So be aware of those as when you're following your ancestors' wanderings and things. You can also search passenger lists and border crossings. If they moved internationally or crossed into different countries. Like you can see a lot of the records online for people coming from Mexico into the United States, or from the United States into Mexico, and then the other way around, going US into Canada, Canada into US. There's a lot of different border crossing things, and most of the times they will have photographs of the person as they're coming in, and it will have on. And the interesting thing is, on some of the records, on the immigration records for coming into the US, if they're coming in from Mexico or coming in from Canada, it asked, why are you here? And they asked you where you were born, why are you here, and what is the name of the person, the name and address of the person you're going to be visiting, and what's their relationship to you. So they asked questions like that. And so it was kind of like interesting, because you could then pick up other people's names in the families, especially if they turn and says, oh, it's my husband, it's my wife, it's my brother, it's my sister, it's my aunt, it's my uncle, it's my parents. If they had that listed there, that these people were coming in. And you could also see too, because a lot of times they're listed in alphabetical order. So you can just flip. Remember, always look above and below. So whenever I come across a border crossing, I go, oh, did they come in with anybody that had the same last name? And then I'm flipping through the different pictures, and they show you the picture of the front of the card, a picture of the back of the card, and then they go on to the next one. And so I was flipping through these pictures, looking at the names and seeing if they were going to the same address, or an address that was close to that address. So those are always good information too. Then you've got the shipping records coming in. Who did they come over on the ships on? Was it my family or another family? I'm trying to remember whose family it was, but they started off with mum, dad, and 2 children. And by the time they got to wherever they were going, they had 3 children. The wife was pregnant when they left England, and they had the baby on the way down somewhere along the way, and it was born at sea. And those are noted on the passenger records as well. You can see, sometimes you'll just see the shipping manifest, the passenger manifest for those that have arrived in a country, and other times you'll see ones that have left a country. Sometimes, if you're lucky, on some of them, especially coming from England down to New Zealand or Australia, you'll get the departure manifest, and then you get the arriving manifest, and you can see who died on the crossing. You can see who was born on the crossing. It's just, you can find all sorts of fascinating information out there on shipping records and things like that too. So I always enjoy those. Although I know when my second great grandmother came, I've got a rough idea when she came to New Zealand. I just don't know how she got here. And the reason I don't know how is because I have looked at every passenger manifest that I can find for arriving in New Zealand, for departing Australia, because I knew she came from Australia. She came over with her husband, who was the miner who got killed. So I'm looking at the shipping manifests for those departing Australia, for those arriving in New Zealand. Can't find them anywhere on them. And I'm like, where the heck are they? So, but I know that they came over at some point, somewhere in time between certain dates, because one child was born in Australia, the next one was born in New Zealand, and there was like an 18-month gap, I think it was, 18 months to 2-year gap. So sometime in that 18 months to 2-year gap, they moved from countries. So I have yet to find the manifest that they were on. So obviously the manifest they were on either hasn't been recorded, or it may have been destroyed or damaged, that they couldn't be scanned or whatnot. But anyway, so you can find out interesting information on passenger lists as well. And in some of the cases, especially those coming from England, you can find out if the government paid some of their fare in order to get settlers down in New Zealand or Australia to help populate those countries. So, there was another thing. They did a call out in England for those who wanted to move to Australia and New Zealand, and the government helped them out in some way. And on the shipping manifest, it will list in the column how much the government paid for them to go down there. Some cases they paid 100%, some they paid 50%. There was different rates for different people based on, I guess, your economic situation at the time, as to whether or not the government paid fully for you or paid a partial for you to immigrate to New Zealand or Australia in order to populate. And you're probably going, but wasn't Australia settled by convicts? Yes, it was, but there was a but. There was two types of settlers to Australia. There were those that volunteered and went down to settle it, and then there were those that were sent there as convicts as part of their sentence. So you've got two types. So when you're talking to somebody from Australia, just be careful, because you might find that they were that they were descended from people who actually volunteered to go. They were actual settlers down there, not the criminals that were sent down there that they've descended from. So be very careful when you're talking to Australians about that one. And then trace family connections. Any relatives or neighbors that migrated together following an extended family or neighbors might lead you to your ancestors' new location as well. Did they, when Brad's great-grandparents came to the US, there was mum, dad, and their 9 or 10 children. 9 or 10, it was either 9 or 10 kids that came with them. And there were some siblings of the great-grandfather that came as well. So there was a big contingency of them that all arrived within around the same time. So look at that too. They may not be, there could be some where they were all on the same ship together, or it could be that they came in over several months, with months in between because they were on different ships and that sort of thing as well. So those are some ideas to help you find your wandering ancestors on Wandering Wednesday. Let's see, you've got follow the migration patterns, check land and property records, explore occupational records, look for census clues, review historical maps, search passenger lists and border crossings, and trace family connections. And I'm going to throw another one in. I'm going to throw another 2 in there as well. Also look at their death certificate, because their death certificates will show where they were born and where they died. So have a look at those as well. That will show you may show you another pattern as well. And then the other one is marriage certificates. They may show where they were originally from. On some marriage certificates, they do show that this is where they're residing right now, but they're originally from whatever country. There are some that have that on there. And what was the other one I was going to throw out there? Can't think of it now. That's escaped my mind. Or it may have where the parents, actually the marriage certificate one's not where they were born, it's where their parents were, where their father was born, where their father was originally from, and what their father's occupation is, and what the groom's occupation is. You find out all sorts of cool. When you get looking into these certificates, when you get looking into certificates and records, probate records are the other ones that you need to look at too, because in there'll be a will, and in the probate records, it will have their full name, it will have where they were born, it will have where and when they died, and in their documentation, and the wills and things, it may also have listed where people are living, because it will have that they want this given to John Smith of blah, 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 blah. And it will have his address there or where he lives, so they can make sure that he gets whatever it is that is required to be given to him. So that's another way that you can trace your ancestors' wanderings as well, because some of them will have different people and go, why are they giving something to somebody in Wyoming? Who do we know in Wyoming? And it turns out that it was some distant, it might have been an uncle, it might have been a sibling that was there that you may not have known about. So that's another way that you can find missing people from your ancestors as well. So that's it from us for tonight. I'm off to read some more of this. It's good. It's nice and twisty. Although I like the long description she gives on different things, but then I'm sort of like, can we just get to the end of these descriptions so we can get on with the story? But the descriptions you do have to pay attention to the descriptions, because they do come into play. So you need to pay attention to the descriptions. Sometimes it feels like they're too long and they could be cut back a little bit, but they are important. It is important to know why she does da 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 da, and it is important to know how she met and how that happened, and how it's important to give the backstory for those for later on in the story. So if you want to grab a copy and join us on Saturday, you can find us at Love to Read Book Club on Facebook, or we're also on Eventbrite as well. The thing is there, and if you scan the QR code up here in the top corner, it will take you to the book that we are reading. It's really good. So go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening. We'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific.